I think, first of all, we have to be frank that traditionally there's been racism in the funding structure.
If when you see me, you only see Black, you're missing the capacity.
Our communities have traditionally not done well with contact with mainstream because we don't usually have representation in mainstream. So I think it cuts off the relational piece, and once you lose that piece, there's a huge impact in terms of funding. Funding tends to decline if you don't hold those relationships.
For generations, Black Canadians have faced exclusion, injustice, and oppression. Systemic barriers have stopped our progress and denied us opportunities to improve our quality of life. Over the decades, different levels of government made feeble attempts to put programs in place to address inequities. But these paternalistic programs that were never made by us or for us consistently missed the mark. Progress was slow. Fast forward to 2013 and the UN proclamation of the United Nations International Decade for People of African Descent that demanded that the world confront past wrongs, root out present-day discrimination, and pave the way for true equality. Here in Canada, it took 5 years for the federal government to acknowledge this global call for action. Finally, in January 2018, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau recognized the UN Decade for People of African Descent, and the work could continue in earnest. In Ottawa, 40 organizations serving Black communities from coast to coast met to develop a model that would guide sustainable capacity building. It was high time to push for a Black-led, Black-service, and Black-focused initiative that could chart the way forward. The government promised $25 million through the Supporting Black Canadian Communities Initiative, a program that would be administered by 3 intermediary organizations and distributed to hundreds of Black organizations to strengthen their capacity and lay the foundation for their bigger successes. By 2021, these intermediary organizations became 4 and were called the Black National Funders Intermediary Network, a unique model for capacity development that delivered on the promise. In a few short years, Tropicana Community Services in Toronto, the Black Business Initiative in Halifax, Groupe 3737 in Montreal, and the Africa Centre in Edmonton have helped hundreds of Black community organizations transform decade-old challenges into extraordinary success.
So I'm Matthew Martel, the CEO of the Black Business Initiative, and we are a business development organization that started in 1996.
Well, Halifax is, there's an eclectic mix of organizations in Halifax because you have a historic Black community that's been there for over 400 years. And then you have the newer immigrants who have been over the years coming to that part of the country, and most of them are staying now. So it's a different mix as compared to Toronto or Montreal, where there's largely immigrant populations, new immigrant populations. But because of that history, there's been significant impact.
Mon nom est Louis-Edgar Jean-François, je suis président directeur général du groupe 3737. C'est quoi le groupe 3737? Ce qu'on a mis en place, c'est un écosystème d'accompagnement entrepreneurial. Donc, on accompagne les entrepreneurs issus de la diversité ethnoculturelle. Donc, ce qu'on a vu sur le terrain, c'est qu'il y avait des enjeux par rapport à des communautés bien précises. Donc, on a décidé d'agir de façon prioritaire pour aider et supporter les collectivités noires.
Hi, I'm Anthony Gray. I'm representing Tropicana Community Services in Toronto. I'm the board chair and president of the organization. Tropicana was started in 1980. As a small organization looking to serve the primarily African Caribbean community in Toronto.
Notre façon de travailler, c'est vraiment une approche écosystémique. Donc, on travaille avec des partenaires, puis nous, dans notre optique, on se dit que pour pouvoir aider, on peut jamais avoir la prétention de pouvoir aider tout seul. Il faut, comme on dit, il faut un village pour élever des enfants. Il faut un écosystème pour élever des entrepreneurs et supporter des entrepreneurs. Donc, on a vraiment été avec cette approche-là. Puis c'est ça qui a fait en sorte que quand on travaillait sur le terrain, puis quand on communiquait, puis on échangeait avec les différentes instances, c'était dans cette optique-là. Ce qu'on disait, c'est que nous, on a une méthodologie, vous avez une expertise, travailler ensemble pour pouvoir justement supporter les entrepreneurs issus de la diversité culturelle. Puis aujourd'hui, encore une fois, on est heureux de dire qu'on travaille maintenant avec 112 partenaires qui viennent maintenant bonifier l'accompagnement qu'on donne aux entrepreneurs. Donc, encore une fois, ça vient renforcer le fait qu'en bout de ligne, les communautés noires sont capables de travailler ensemble.
So I was a part of SBCCI from the inception. I will cast your mind back when SBCCI started with the 4 intermediaries. Shortly after we were granted the funds, George Floyd and COVID happened. So that was my introduction really into the SBCCI program. We did our first call for proposal. And part of the first call for proposal was to ensure that we created a framework. So the important thing to remember with SBCCI here is we had nothing to start with. So we started with 3 intermediaries. It was Tropicana, it was BBI, and it was Groupe 3737. That was in 2019. So what we ended up doing was we created the framework. So as you see SBCCI today, the program guidelines, the matrix that we use, we created all of those processes. So I'm sure when you speak to my counterpart, we can talk about some of the challenges, if you will, that we went through. The 3 of us have never done that before.
When Michelle Obama came to Halifax recently, I was speaking to the group that were bringing in, and I pointed out to them that if when you see me, you only see Black, then you're missing a bigger thing. You're missing the Ross Simmonses, the Dr. Joneses, and so on. You're missing the capacity, and you have shortened yourself as well. But so we take advantage of that. So I believe in terms of the broader community, and sometimes our own community, we could be our worst enemy, as a matter of fact, who think that because it's done by a Black organization, not jumping on your company, because you're doing this film, it's not going to be good, right? If you have that perception to overcome, based on only that, and that you haven't seen the work, then yeah, you're actually going to be in a position where you have to work harder and better.
Donc, on a commencé avec un premier financement de 25 millions. C'était pas suffisant. Donc, quand on parle de 25 millions, là, si on divise par 1,3 million, on parle de quelque chose comme une vingtaine de dollars par Canadien noir. C'était pas suffisant pour pouvoir faire un travail correct de renforcement de capacité. Donc, c'était important de continuer les représentations et de faire en sorte qu'il y ait plus de ressources qui soient disponibles pour pouvoir atteindre des objectifs satisfaisants et d'impact dans un contexte de renforcement de capacité.
The 3 organizations were chosen from the federal government. So we were one of the ones, the 3 we were chosen. And then really at the end of it, we just got connected. So we were given the task, you have to figure out how to get this funding off the ground. So we just got together, the 3 organizations, the CEOs, executive directors, and the leads at the time. We got together, we met, and we talked about what do we want the legacy to look like? What do we want to see? What are we, because we're the leaders in this, what do we want the community to see, right? And one of the most important things for us, it was transparency.
This documentary is not a celebration of lofty ideas, but a rejoicing in the birth of the Black National Funders Network, a powerful engine of Black empowerment that shatters systemic barriers to self-determination and prosperity. Can it embody the very spirit of the UN decade? Can it forge a future where Black Canadian brilliance, Black enterprise, Black potential are unleashed? Traditionally, securing federal grants involves a complex and lengthy bureaucratic process that consumes meager community resources. Applications are overwhelming and funding decisions far from transparent. In 2019, I was brought in as a facilitator of the new Black Capacity Building Initiative, an idea whose time had come. I experienced firsthand the challenges of aligning government processes with the needs of grassroots organizations. The intermediary network was the solution to bridge the gap between funders and recipients. It gave community organizations a direct channel to decision makers who looked like them and understood their challenges and opportunities. Bringing such a diverse group of stakeholders together towards a common goal was not an easy feat. Bridges had to be built across organizations residing from coast to coast, divided by language, culture, ethnicity. It required a relentless focus on eliminating red tape to allow resources to flow to the communities and empower them to thrive.
And if I were to paint a bit of a picture as to before SBCCI, some of the challenges that our not-for-profits within the community would face, again, is that access to funding is increasingly challenging. What we're hearing time and time again is that having trusted Black organizations leading this sort of initiative makes it significantly more easier for them to navigate government funding, navigate the supports that are earmarked for the community, just to have this initiative that allows you to know where you can access funding, how much funding you can access, to have wraparound supports around that funding has been extremely impactful, and that has not existed before.
So our mission was to do whatever we needed to do to make sure it succeeded. I mean, and at the end of the day, we're professionals, right? And we knew in our community, we have individuals who can be trusted. We just needed to prove it to the world, right? We had no doubt that we could work together. Did we have disagreements, or did we have areas that we did not agree on? Absolutely, but that's part of being at a team. That's part of being a holistic community. And one of the most important things for us is we made sure we did whatever we could to make it work.
En date de mai 2024, le financement total octroyé pour renforcer les capacités de 1172 organisations à travers le Canada s'élève à 221 millions de dollars.
At the end of the first call for proposal, there was never a point where we felt that we were not united and collaborating together. We were no longer the three intermediaries. We became one team. And I think that was the most important thing. And we saw that very, very clearly. And then when our fourth intermediary, Africa Center, came on a year later, they became a part of us, and that's when we became the national funders. So it was never Tropicana, BBI, Groupe 37, Africa Center. We were one group administering SBCCI to our community, which we knew and we understood that they were going to do their best.
My name is Sam Juru, and I'm the Executive Director of the Africa Center. The Africa Center exists with a mission to serve the Black community. Primarily, we are a community organization that offers social support. The other piece is that mainstream funders have been very reluctant to give Black communities money, particularly a lot of money. And it's the first time that the Canadian government has been able to produce or give away that amount of money to Black communities.
So in terms of, communities feeling that funding organizations and funders maybe are not fully transparent, or maybe, there's an element of gatekeeping at play, I think that is something that often will sit with an individual or an organization.
The decision-making for who gets funded and so on is a community-driven decision. It's not the intermediaries. They gather the guys to review those things and make the decision of who and how much is invested. And you had the unique design, because there's certain things that Louis Edgar would prefer in Quebec and Tropicana would prefer in their system, and some things that BBI do. So we did that. But they also had to speak to the tech. SurveyMonkey applied to create the system that's going to handle the overabundance of requests for investment. Because you told this Black community that someone have millions of dollars over here. There's thousands of people who already were coming to that. So they had to create the filters that can stand the test of transparency, can stand the test of ethics, can stand the test of procurement strategies, so that we too would know that when we do things, we do them ethically and well. And I think that was the beauty of it. And in all aspects of it, the folks who were actually investing in us weren't sure we were able to deliver. So even to the extent when we were asked in October of the first year if we'll have the money out in March, the expectation was that we won't be able to do it. Guess what? We got our money out before the other parts of SBCI got theirs out, which is a significant achievement for a Black organization, less than 12 months on the ground.
The other thing we have to also understand, the way things work in Toronto is very different from Montreal. That might be different from New Brunswick, might be different from Nunavut. So we then, as an organization, had to figure out how do we bring that all together so that it made sense for everyone.
Quand on parle de renforcer les collectivités noires canadiennes, ben, si les collectivités noires canadiennes sont fortes, c'est le Canada au complet qui est beaucoup plus fort. Donc, notre idée, c'est vraiment de mobiliser, à faire comprendre et de faire en sorte qu'à la fin de la journée, on puisse ramener les investissements nécessaires pour 2025, 2026, 2027, 2028, 2029 et de faire en sorte qu'éventuellement, en 2030, on puisse rendre autosuffisant cette initiative-là, si on parle de cette initiative-là en particulier.
After you've seen the last few years, we know about I Can't Breathe in the US, and the work is still unfinished.
In 2020, the world recoiled in horror as George Floyd was murdered before our very eyes. The outcry for justice could no longer be ignored. Here in Canada, the indignities suffered by Black and racialized communities were laid bare for all to see. Anguish and revolt led to action and a determination to transform present-day realities and create an equitable future. The Black National Funders Network was fueled by this movement for social change and became a beacon for Black community empowerment.
When I think about George Floyd, it still stings, right? Because it's a few years ago, but it's still so raw. And I think that was a time that a lot of people really had to sit down and say, what am I going to do? I could be a George Floyd. Right? That could have been me, that could have been my son, that could have been anyone, my father, whomever it was. And we got to the point where enough was enough. And how are we going to channel those energies into doing something that was positive for the community? So when SBCCI came around, that was also one of our guiding principles with the other intermediaries to say, you know what? This is the reason that we have to make it work. Because we have to be that community to show individuals hurt is happening, hurt has always happened, and it will continue to happen, but this is the success story. This is what we have control over, and this was how we were able to create a success story through SBCCI.
So access to funding is a big challenge, and sustainability is another issue because without funding, they often close up shop after a couple of years because they just cannot sustain the activities. And that is where the SBCCI program comes in. It comes in not just to give funding for them to be able to build their capacity, but it also goes a step further by providing supports for these organizations to actually do that beyond the money.
Quand on parle d'enjeux d'accès, accès à des ressources, accès à des réseaux, accès à des capitaux. Et on s'est rendu compte que parmi ces trois communautés-là, les communautés noires vivaient de plus grands enjeux d'accès. Donc, on a décidé d'agir de façon prioritaire pour aider et supporter les collectivités noires en adressant les trois enjeux que j'ai mentionnés tout à l'heure.
So when you get the funding, we have to do it right. As a community, we have to make sure that the guardrails are clear, everybody stays within them as we evaluate the applications for funding. The criteria are satisfied before we award funding. And then we follow up and make sure that the intended purpose of those funds is actually how it was used. And no program is perfect, right? But I think we've got, better than a 95, 98% success rate in the funding, which is surprising, quite frankly. Because I've been part of distributions of funds before in my corporate life, and it depends on who gets them, how they use them, but if you get 60 or 70%, you're thinking, oh, you've done a good job. But having a better than 90% success rate is remarkable. And I have to commend all the national funders for their diligence in making sure that that is the case. So we've earned, I believe, the trust of the government to be good custodians of those funds and trustees of such an important initiative, and I'm looking forward to them sustaining it.
This many years on, we are absolutely finding our groove, but from a very early point, I think the respect and professionalism throughout the organizations was great. So from the get-go, that collaboration was so strong, and you kind of hope that it doesn't wane over time, and I really think it's only gotten stronger.
Au tout début de l'initiative, en 2019, il n'y avait aucune donnée pour soutenir les besoins réels en matière de renforcement de capacité des organismes qui supportent nos collectivités. Mais heureusement, durant nos 2 premières années, étant donné qu'on a eu 2 appels de projet, on a été capable de collecter des données. Et cette collecte de données a été faite par une firme indépendante qui nous a produit un Impact Report, qui ont mesuré l'impact que l'initiative a eu sur l'ensemble des collectivités noires, mais aussi pour le Canada entier. Parce que lorsque les communautés noires vont bien, le Canada va bien.
Lors du 3e appel de projet, à l'échelle nationale, 1415 dossiers ont été évalués, desquels 794 ont été approuvés pour fin de financement. Cela représente un total de 114 millions de dollars qui ont été demandés, desquels uniquement 37 millions ont pu être octroyés faute d'argent supplémentaire, soit un tiers de la demande nationale.
Having the experience to fall down, have some bumps and bruises, learn from them, and then use that knowledge collectively to support each other, I think really has allowed the organizations to work effectively together.
The path of progress is rarely smooth. The BNFIN was born before the global reckoning of 2020, but found itself at the center of a shifting landscape. The task given seemed monumental: create a nationwide network of more than 1,000 multi-sectoral nonprofit organizations. Even the most seasoned leaders would have found these tasks daunting. And yet, in 2023, 730 organizations, each with its own history, ways of operating, were thrust into an alliance. Clashes and dissonance were inevitable. Old methods collided with demands for something truly transformative.
Audace au féminin, c'est un organisme à but non lucratif et sa mission, c'est vraiment de mettre en lumière les femmes noires qui brillent dans l'ombre. Donc, c'est arrivé parce que c'est parti d'un constat. Moi, je suis née ici au Québec. Et depuis que je suis jeune, ça a toujours été ce débat où on parlait d'une sous-représentation ou même d'absence de personnes racisées dans différentes sphères, et encore plus les femmes noires. Et j'étais un peu fatiguée de voir cette invisibilisation, surtout sur notre apport, notre contribution dans cette société. Fait que Audace au féminin est venu de ce constat-là, d'une frustration, c'est né, où je suis allée dans une pharmacie, et c'est en 2016. Et je suis dans un quartier où il y a une forte concentration de personnes noires. Et on me dit dans cette pharmacie qu'il n'y a pas de produits cosmétiques pour les femmes de couleur, donc les femmes noires, donc les peaux foncées, c'est ce qu'elle m'avait dit. Là, j'en revenais pas en 2016, surtout dans ce quartier-là. Donc là, je me suis dit, OK, enough, it's enough. Il est temps qu'on se crée une plateforme qui va pas simplement présenter la femme noire avec les produits cosmétiques, parce que oui, c'est vrai qu'on est coloré, oui, on aime ça, mais on est capable de parler d'actualité, d'intelligence artificielle, d'environnement. On doit nous entendre et nous voir aussi sous d'autres angles. Donc, c'est comme ça qu'est venu en premier lieu le Salon international de la femme noire, qui est l'événement phare de Audace au féminin.
Not Just You is an organization that was started by a young lady who has sickle cell disease, which is a very common disease in the Black community.
Sickle cell disease is a disease that disproportionately affects individuals of African descent, and the work that we do is serving these communities. But oftentimes, if it's a white person or someone who's not Black, who has no relation to this disease, doesn't quite understand how much this is affecting the community, they may not necessarily pick our organization for funding. They may not understand the gravity of the impacts that we're doing, right? And with organizations like Africa Center, knowing that this is something that our community needs, organizations like Not Just You can thrive. And I think that was the challenge when I first started out the nonprofit, was I just felt like nobody really understood what I was doing, you know.
So when I think about the very beginning, we had our first call for proposal. And what was great about that, we were oversubscribed. And oversubscription means that we had more applications than we were able to fund. The government recognized that they needed to provide more money, so they provided more monies, and then we ended up having a top-up is what we call it. So we ended up having more organizations that we were able to provide support for. Then we had a second call for proposal, and we were able to give more organizations some funds as well.
Parmi ces OBNL qui ont reçu du financement via l'initiative Appuyer les Communautés Noires du Canada, 8 secteurs d'activité principales ressortent. Les secteurs communautaires, agriculture, santé et bien-être, jeunesse, entrepreneuriat, handicap, justice et LGBTQIA2+.
We're working through that process and we're making grounds, but the grounds that we're making is very, very small, right? So some of the milestones when I look at the whole SBCCI process, it's slow. It's great, but it's slow. We need more time to continue the work that we're doing. This cannot end because at the end of it, if it comes 2025 and we close shop, then what?
The mission of Youth Non-Trust Services is to educate and empower youth in North York community area. Through our program and services, we're able to impact young people. We know that what they need is that education and empowerment to be able to reach their potentials in life, and it's aligned by the need of the community.
The big challenge when I retired, when I left the school system, was worrying about youth, Black youth, what's going to become of them in this country, in the community. And when I found Why Not, that has taken care of that and continues to take care of it in a way that is very, very progressive and enhancing in the community.
I think if Why Not was not available to the youth in our community, I think that would make a huge impact to the confidence that youth need to grow and to have a vision to become something. I think Why Not provides different programs and services that enhances the skills that they have that they probably never were confident of. So not having a platform such as Why Not, where you're able to come, grow, learn, and even learn from your colleagues, learn from your staff, the board, and just everyone, because we all come together as a community. I think not having a close platform that's so close and very specific, like they care about you, it's beyond the job, they care about your personal life, how to help you improve your skills and everything. I think that if we don't have a platform such as Why Not, it would really impact and make the youth feel less encouraged to move forward in life.
Le renforcement de capacité qui a été produite au sein de l'organisation Groupe 3737 a été crucial, autant pour nous en tant qu'organisme, on a été capable d'assurer notre viabilité financière, mais aussi de travailler sur notre pérennité, mais aussi l'impact qu'on a eu sur ces 206 organisations qui eux-mêmes sont passés du stade de économiquement non viable et certains sont rendus maintenant au stade qu'ils sont pérennes.
Grants like this, they're so important. They're not just important, they're vital. And it's not just the money. Honestly, it's feeling valued. That was key for me, that a grant was out there saying, we want to support you as a Black leader, as a Black entrepreneur. What are your needs and how can we help you? No one had ever asked me anything like that.
So I just wanted to provide an advice to those new non-for-profit organizations. Do not hesitate to apply. If the application weren't able to get funded, be assured that we always contact you, letting you know about the gaps on your application, providing assistance on how to better come up with new application and uplift it in order to get funding for the next rounds.
And the Black Learners Advisory Committee, which carried out research in all the communities across the province, did it in the way that we do it today still, participatory action research. Afrocentric centering the voices of our community.
So the research component of the Delmar Buddy Learning Institute is really, really important. To me, it's what grounds the Institute. It should inform everything else we do because they're the ones who are looking at how are African Nova Scotian learners treated when they arrive, when they start school? What are the different programs in place? What do their educators look like? What supports are there? Are they on the right path? So they can then determine these are the next steps we need to take. Research is so tedious, but it's so important.
Donc c'est vraiment de continuer le travail qui a été fait du côté de l'initiative d'Appuyer Communautés Noires. Donc les ressources, on parle du fonds de 200 millions, on parle d'un réseau de 1000 organisations, on a un réseau en termes de consultants qui accompagnent ces organisations-là, donc du mentorat, du coaching. Donc c'est vraiment de pouvoir avoir des investissements supplémentaires pour maintenir, si on veut, cette infrastructure d'accompagnement en financement puis en support, en coaching, mentorat et soutien d'experts au-delà du 31 mars 2025. Donc, nous, ce qu'on fait dans la mobilisation et dans les représentations, on travaille justement à amener cette confirmation-là pour qu'une fois pour toutes, on sache qu'on a les ressources pertinentes et nécessaires pour poursuivre le travail au-delà du 31 mars 2025.
Mistrust lingered, a shadow born from past disappointments, and yet the stakes were undeniable. 87% of the applicants had never received capacity funding. Every one of the applications showed a hunger for real lasting change. Many organizations were facing larger issues that dwarfed their funding accessibility issues. How could they be supported?
If Why Not was not around, my community would be in shambles. The youth would be in shambles. The crime rate will rise. Myself, I consider myself a senior on second shift. I don't stop. I like to help. So it's going to, fragment my activities everywhere.
There is still so much work that needs to be done and so much engagement and teaching tools and resources that need to be published. But DBDLI has become a real cornerstone for people, a place where people feel safe to say, I'm going to reach out to Lindsay and see if she has a suggestion about a book where I'm talking about Black history. Or I'm going to reach out to the youth department and see if they can come in and run a program. And let's talk about the African Nova Scotian History Challenges, which students participate in throughout the year. It's a really important piece. And I think sometimes people forget how much happens within these four walls. But the great thing is they don't stay in these four walls. Everything we do goes out into our communities. And that's what's so amazing. That's the real game changer. And without that, I don't know, I think it'd be really tough to connect with students who feel like they're not heard or their voice isn't amplified throughout the year when they're sitting in that classroom.
Ce que je peux dire, avec cette subvention venant du groupe 3737, le formulaire était beaucoup plus facile à remplir. C'était friendly user, là. C'est venu dans un format plus léger, où c'est possible de le remplir sans nécessairement d'être accompagné. Et si on a besoin d'être accompagné, c'est possible d'aller chercher de l'aide ou ailleurs, on te donne un numéro 1-800 ou bien un courriel puis que tu reçois jamais un retour.
Ce qui est extraordinaire aujourd'hui, c'est que le Centre culturel afro de Montréal a été chercher plus de 20 millions de dollars en termes de financement pour pouvoir, être propriétaire de leur infrastructure et de faire en sorte qu'il y ait dans leur infrastructure une quinzaine à une vingtaine d'organisations synergiques avec leurs activités pour qu'ils puissent vraiment collaborer, synergiser, un peu comme le modèle du groupe 3737 et vraiment faire en sorte de dynamiser la culture, si on veut, afro, non seulement à Montréal, mais à travers le Canada. Donc, le CECAM est une de nos histoires à succès. Il y en a d'autres histoires à succès que je pourrais mentionner, mais je pense que le CECAM, là, rapidement, qui me vient en tête, c'est une organisation pour nous. On est fiers, on est contents, on est heureux que cette organisation ait pu se développer de la sorte.
Le Centre culturel afro-canadien de Montréal, dans son espace, dans son entièreté, représente 45 535 pieds carrés, qui est quand même assez significatif, et ça inclut une bâtisse existante dont on fait la rénovation, une nouvelle construction qui est notre signature pour rendre le bâtiment complètement accessible, mais également permettre au public d'avoir accès à de la programmation gratuite, et enfin une salle de spectacle de 286 personnes. Nous, TT, cet investissement très tôt de fonds de roulement Dans le centre culturel, c'est difficile de croire qu'on serait en train d'avoir cette conversation aujourd'hui, que le centre culturel afro-canadien de Montréal, à peine 3 ans après son existence, serait déjà en train de livrer le projet d'infrastructure culturelle le plus important de l'histoire du Canada pour les communautés noires.
We provided support by calling in and checking in with those organizations to say, hey, how's it going? What supports can we provide for you? We also created an environment that we call a community of practice, or COP for short form. And what that provides was those organizations to come together, to network, to learn. So we, as the intermediaries, we are now training those grassroots organizations on things like governance, on things like their work plans, or on how do you build, an organization so you go from grassroots to capacity building in order to spread your wings so that when you do go for other funding opportunities, you have that framework.
Resilience defines those who shape the future. The Black Funders Network doesn't simply offer handouts, it unlocks potential. We are talking transformation. 94% of nonprofits strengthen their governance. Boards were expanded and given a fresh perspective. An average of 2 new funding sources emerged from each organization. This is a far cry from charity. It's laying the foundations for sustainable impact and an opportunity to rectify inequalities that have kept Black Canadians from reaching their full potential.
The government priorities changing, right? Not recognizing that this particular initiative needs to be permanent. The recognition that we need more time as a community to build our capacity. We can't build it in 3 or 4 years. We need more time, we need more funds. And those organizations need the time to develop themselves and to develop their programs so that they can one day become more self-sufficient.
Il y a eu 582 demandes de financement qui ont été faites pour les collectivités noires au Québec et le taux d'approbation était à la hauteur de 57%. Donc, vous comprenez que toutes les OBNL qui avaient un historique de 0 revenu, le taux de refus était proche du 100%. Donc, il y a vraiment un travail qui a été fait.
En date de mai 2024, à travers le Canada, le nombre de bénévoles s'élevait à 20 130, une hausse de 83% après le deuxième appel de projet, et le financement distribué par les intermédiaires se chiffrait à 98 millions, soit 37 millions supplémentaires.
I will say that the BNFIN fund helps us to bring staff. And with the staff, from 0 staff to 7 staff, and from unfunctioning board of directors to functioning board of directors, from 0 volunteers to over 20 volunteers. And that helps to expand our after-school program. That helps to expand our mental health and to get professionals that work with us. It's not just we doing it. With that, we're able to assess some of the services that we need in the community, build a collaborate partnership with other organizations and community stakeholders.
Grâce à ce financement-là, on a été en mesure d'aller chercher 2 employés. Et grâce à une de ces employés-là qui nous a permis justement de développer notre stratégie de philanthropie, ça nous a permis justement d'aller chercher les ressources nécessaires. Ça nous a permis d'embaucher quelqu'un d'autre. Donc, on peut dire vraiment largement, autant que ça nous a aidé à vraiment chercher 2 employés sur le coup pour une période d'1 année, on a été en mesure, dans le fond, d'utiliser ces employés-là comme effet de levier pour aller embaucher d'autres personnes. Donc, on considère que c'est un investissement qui a rendu le double de ce qui avait été investi.
When I joined the organization, there was myself and 1 other staff person. We are now at 13 staff with a predominant mixture of permanent and some part-time folks in that number. We've had to grow in terms of responding to the needs. In terms of kind of the utilization of the funds, 2 particular positions that are an outgrowth of that. So we have one now that also focuses very heavily on Afrocentric education and communication. We have shared positioning around management of an e-learning platform. And we've made a very explicit interconnection between our publishing work, the production, as well as the training opportunities that we have in the publishing area. So yeah, so it's really had a significant outgrowth for us.
We are so fortunate that we got the exposure that we needed to show what our organization does in a more elaborate capacity. SBCCI has allowed us to expand our programming, which really attracts a lot of funders to our organization. One of the funding sources that we really weren't able to access prior to SBCCI was sponsorships, just working with the private sector. And I never really thought that because I got a grant from the public sector that it would help me with engaging private organizations. And I'm so grateful because now we've been able to have I think we have a partnership base of about 10 fantastic organizations. Some are international, some are local here in Edmonton, and some are national across the country. And we couldn't have done that without SBCCI.
Dans l'accompagnement, on amène les entrepreneurs à prendre une partie de leur profit puis voir dans quelle mesure ils peuvent réinvestir dans les collectivités pour avoir à la fin de la journée un impact social. Donc c'est important de comprendre le groupe 3737, notre finalité, c'est d'avoir vraiment un impact social sur le terrain. Donc on a de beaux résultats, donc il y a des résultats directs, des résultats indirects. En termes de résultats directs, on a accompagné, ça c'est les chiffres au 31 mars 2023, on a accompagné plus de 2200 entrepreneurs, aidé la création de plus de 1300 emplois et collectivement nos entreprises ont généré plus de 200 millions de dollars de chiffre d'affaires. Donc ça c'est des résultats qui ont été atteints principalement dans la région montréalaise, ici à peu près dans la province de Québec. Donc, vu ces résultats directs, ça a ouvert beaucoup de yeux.
That, we as a community, or communities across Canada can really look at this model, be proud of ourselves and see across Canada the impact that this initiative has made. Tens of millions of dollars have gone directly into Black-led, Black-serving organizations that every day those leaders are waking up and they're making significant impacts within their communities. And it only takes a couple minutes of reading some of the success stories, and there are hundreds, to really get inspired by the impact that this program has had.
Leadership is a burden many aren't willing to bear. True governance means facing hard truth and making tough choices. Breaking down barriers isn't glamorous. Those 35,000 hours of coaching and 11,000 workshops represent countless efforts and unseen battles. As for the results, they speak for themselves. A child seeing a new path forward, a community rising. Each of those hundred new jobs represents sweat, tears, and the triumphs of perseverance. This is a labor that moves mountains.
I actually don't want to think about that. If SBCCI was not around, what would happen? We have done so much work, so much great work, and there's so much positive stories that has come out of it. When you think about when I speak to young women, especially when I was in Edmonton, I reflect on a couple of young women that I spoke to, and they indicated that because of SBCCI, they are able to have meaning in life. They were able to come out of some abusive situations because of the nonprofit organization that has helped them. When I think about individuals who talk about wanting to aspire to do something, it's no longer a dream because they're seeing it in action. But if SBCCI is gone, that dream might be gone as well. So it's very, very important when we think about SBCCI, it's not a potential, it's not a should we, it's what we must do.
I think we did a good job. We figure between 90-95% of the funding went to the right people at the right time, which is key to doing this kind of work. Folks who have gotten that support are very appreciative, and it reflects in the federal government and others who have come back. And like we heard Minister Hussein at the UN in May, saying how proud this was a model that Canada can show the rest of the world.
So there's been positive unintended impacts of BNFIN on the 4 intermediary organizations. First of all, there's been reputation. of these organizations within their respective areas. So to be specific, with the Africa Center. This intermediary role and place in BNFIN has given us a lot of reputation and credibility across Western Canada. We are funding organizations as far as British Columbia, Saskatchewan, Winnipeg, and we are doing this fairly and equitably. So that's come with a lot of trust, but not just trust from the Black communities. Unintended is trust from other funders who might have been skeptical about funding Black communities.
Il y a plus de 11 000 bénévoles qui ont été ajoutés aux 1000 organisations qui sont supportées par l'initiative d'appui aux communautés noires. Il y a eu plus de 60 millions de dollars en financement qui ont été attribués à ces organisations. Donc, il y a 1,7 sources de financement qui ont été ajoutées à chacune de ces organisations. Donc, si le programme démontre autant de succès, ce serait un non-sens de ne pas poursuivre quelque chose qui fonctionne et quelque chose qui marche. Et c'est là-dessus qu'on va travailler très fort pour faire en sorte que ça puisse se poursuivre.
I would say that we probably had a 60 to 70% increase in terms of uptake in the use of our resources. We know that we're getting a lot more offers to be actually in schools with students and with teachers for training. We've had the opportunity to be involved very intimately with a couple of schools, which means like we work long-term with their teachers in the public school system.
The sickle cell community, we practically only have one doctor for all of us in Edmonton. So she went through it like, oh my God, you're gonna meet this person, you're gonna meet that person, you're gonna meet Maria and Dr. Boster, and they're wonderful people. It was reassuring that don't worry, everything's gonna be okay feeling. Yeah, that was amazing.
The work of dismantling systemic barriers is far from over. Since the inception of the Black Network of Funders, 150 million of fresh revenues have been created. 1,200 individuals have been provided with meaningful jobs, and 11,000 souls have stepped up to contribute to the cause. Imagine for a moment what more funding would do. Think of the untapped potential and of all the communities still waiting.
It hurts to see some of the organizations that do not get funded, but the reality is that if this program doesn't grow, we can't award funds to everyone. So there may be elements of that, but we do our best to be extremely transparent, above and beyond what's required by the government. The reporting is extremely transparent. The adjudication process is extremely transparent. We use committees that are not comprised of our staff to adjudicate those grants because we want community, to that point, feeling as though this fund is awarded based on merit.
Par rapport à la demande des collectivités en termes de dollars et par rapport à l'offre que nous avons pour distribuer, eh bien, nous avons à peine 1/8 du montant demandé. Donc, les organismes qui vont être financés en début 2024, c'est seulement 1/8 de la demande qu'on va pouvoir soutenir. Ce 7/8, c'est des besoins réels, c'est des organismes réels qui font un travail réel sur le terrain. Et nous, ça nous ouvre la porte sur notre prochain défi, comment accompagner ces organisations.
So yes, when you build those infrastructures and get the right people to the table, and I have to say with the SPCCI group, once Sharif from Edmonton came on and the rest of us in the support organizations, we're always thinking community first in delivering this service, right? It's about taking on the challenge to do it, but taking on the challenge to do it well. And that's a key piece of that, Together Collective.
The process and the model of how funding is received through SBCCI, I think is unique and powerful in that, one, of course, we ourselves are organizations who are on the receiving end of funding, but are also funders in community. So We are connected to community. We are members of the communities that we serve. So we really do have that lived experience that I think is extremely important in the process. So that is certainly not always the case when it comes to funding community initiatives.
The next phase is, I see the last 3 years as a prototype. We were testing out a concept and if this concept would work. I think this concept has been a resounding success.
As of May 2024, across Canada, 2,900 jobs were created. 20,130 volunteers were supporting Black-led organizations, and $392 million were generated as revenue by these organizations.
What we've noticed over the last 3 years has been how BNFIN and through this SBCCI funding, we have catalyzed Black communities.
L'ensemble des 4 intermédiaires, durant les 4 dernières années, on a fait beaucoup de essais et erreurs. Mais je dirais plus qu'on a fait beaucoup de essais et succès, parce que les erreurs étaient moindres. Et on a travaillé ensemble pour développer une méthodologie d'accompagnement. Comme je le disais depuis le début, on n'est pas un distributeur de chèques, on est spécialisé en renforcement de capacité. Et cette méthodologie, ça inclut comment qu'avec une approche personnalisée, il y a un suivi individuel qui est fait avec chacune des organisations, notamment au niveau mensuel, mais aussi au niveau trimestriel. Et c'est ce qui nous permet d'aller collecter des données essentielles que présentement, il y a des données que uniquement le SBCCI a collectées. Dans toute l'histoire des Noirs au Canada, cet échantillon de 1000 organisations, c'est une mine d'informations. Donc, imaginez qu'au 31 mars 2025, on met fin au programme. Eh bien, ces données, cette connaissance des collectivités noires vont être perdues à jamais. Et dans cette méthodologie aussi, il y a la façon qu'on a permis aux organisations noires de travailler en synergie dans leur propre collectivité.
Those organizations that are today breathing a sigh of relief because they've got the capacity, they've got support, they've got a network, although the network won't change, but the financial resources that you need to sustain that business is gone. That means you got to figure out and you got to hustle and you've got to knock on doors, and now your focus is about finding the next funder, the next philanthropic organization, the next hopefully corporate sponsor with excess capacity that they're willing to invest in your vision, your mission, your purpose. That's going to take a lot of work and energy. And many of these organizations, they just don't have it. And I am very concerned that we'll see many of these organizations cease to exist. But the needs in their communities will not.
Particulièrement dans le dernier appel au projet, on voit de façon significative comment que des organismes à but non lucratif qui sont dirigés par des Noirs travaillent ensemble en concertation pour faire face à des enjeux complexes de leur collectivité. Et il y a 5 ans, nous n'avions pas ça au pays. Nous ne l'avions pas. Maintenant, nous l'avons. Est-ce que c'est le moment d'arrêter ça au 31 mars 2025? La réponse, c'est non.
So the collaboration, it's just us working together as intermediaries and us working together with the organizations that we support, because the end goal is really to have a stronger Black ecosystem of non-for-profit organizations, because this funding may not, we don't know how long it will last, but while we still have it, our aim is to really strengthen these organizations. And so for organizations that come after, they have that opportunity to be able to stand on the shoulders of the organizations that have gone before. So collaboration is really the defining theme, I believe, throughout this program.
And then the other thing that I think is novel and exciting is that we then get to see the benefits within our own community because, again, we're members of those communities. So, you know, I think that part of it really is novel, and just allowing community organizations to adjudicate and be intermediaries for those funds is a unique model for our community at this point. I hope that we've done a wonderful job of stewarding that, and hopefully this continues on and we get to make more significant impact. We see those funds grow. We see the flexibility, and we see the ability for our organizations to advocate for change will be strengthened through the initiative.
Garder cette pente progressive, mais aussi cette pente progressiste qui peut que bénéficier aux collectivités noires. Et si ça bénéficie aux collectivités noires, mais ça bénéficie à l'ensemble du Canada.
Inside our country, folks were still asking, how come these organizations have worked so well together? We had learned to get out of the way of each other, and we had learned to support when it's necessary as well.
De façon collective, de façon synergique, en équipe, de travailler à faire en sorte que des investissements puissent se poursuivre au-delà du 31 mars 2025 et qu'on continue ensemble le travail d'impact, de solidification et de renforcement des collectivités noires à travers le Canada et qu'à la fin de la journée, que cet impact-là se traduise sur notre communauté, sur la communauté noire de façon directe et concrète et de faire en sorte que en 2030, en 2040, qu'on puisse mettre en place un écosystème, qu'on puisse mettre en place des ressources pérennes qui vont toujours être là pour pouvoir supporter nos enfants, leurs enfants, donc toutes les générations à venir. Donc ça, c'est mon souhait pour l'initiative d'appui aux communautés noires.
Honestly, I do know that the government recognized the hard work that we have put in, and they have mentioned on some of the calls, that they were happy with the work that we did. But it was a lot of work that the intermediaries did, and in doing that, we were able to prove not only to our community, but also to the government that they can trust us, right? And that for me is one of the biggest things, is that they can look at us. They no longer can say that there is no one in the Black community who would be able to administer funds. That's not in their repertoire anymore, because they have seen the proof that we have provided here. And it's across Canada. So it's not just Ontario, it's not just Quebec, it's across Canada that we have collaborated and worked together to put a successful program together.
The Black Network of Funders doesn't just work, it transforms. Let all Black Canadians be proud of what has been accomplished. Let us honor those who paved the way and whose efforts made these extraordinary results possible. The legacy of the Black Capacity Building Initiative and Black Network of Funders continues to fuel the movement for Black empowerment. When we uplift those left behind, we build a world where everyone can thrive. When we invest in Black and racialized communities, we invest in a stronger Canada for all. This is an invitation to be part of the change we want to see in the world. Will you answer the call?